welcome to BioBasics Huddle. This is Ramesh Chandran from BioBasics. Some of you may have heard of BioBasics, but some of you may be new. As an introduction, we are a organic food company working for the past 5 years, offering over 300 odd organic, chemical-free whole food products, ranging from fresh produce to grocery items like rices, millets, oils, etc., including millets. And you can order all of these online as well as offline. And some of you might be new to these huddles. So welcome to the huddles. These are get-togethers among friends where we talk about things that matter to all of us, food and health and environment, sustainability and such. So today we're going to talk about millets. We are going to focus on what I call the revival of millets for both our health and our heritage. To start with, just to give a little bit of an introduction about how we relate, I personally relate, or how BioBasics relates to millets. I'd like to share some of my personal experiences with millets, which I think all of you will identify with. I grew up as a Mallu in Maharashtra. We were used to eating white rice and wheat. And I do remember the local folks from where we were in Pune, from the lower socioeconomic sections of the society, used to eat bhakri ki roti and jowar, which is the bajra and sorghum that we know of today. And we never tried these at home. And nobody brought it home. And we continued in blissful ignorance of these grains. And it was tucked away as something that the poor eat. And this was the 70s and the early 80s. And later in Trivandrum in the late 80s, I rarely came across anyone who knew or talked about any of these grains. And it is still probably not very popular in Kerala. Possibly because Kerala is not a very dry, arid country where millets grow on a regular basis, or it's not known for millet cultivation. So it's more of a rice nation. And we talked about this about a couple of months ago in one of the huddles. So years later, when I was working in Mumbai, we used to come across these small outlets run by the government, and they used to call, which used to serve what's called chumka bhakar in Marathi. It's kind of like our Amma canteens in Tamil Nadu serving idlis. So it was chumka bhakar, basically, which were bhakri, which is bajra or pearl millet, along with some kind of a curry. And again, we never tried it. And during our stint abroad in the US and Europe, we came across many other grains like quinoa and spelt and emmer, and which were not particularly millets, but a good replacement for traditional rice and wheat. It was then that in 2014 that Devi, my wife and the co-founder of BioBasics, started experimenting with all the 7 varieties of millets that we knew at that time. Now we discovered some more. And the taste was very different. And I was in my early 40s then. And we went whole hog into millets at that point. And I almost lost 10 kilos of weight in less than a year. So that was my experience with millets. And I'm sure each of us has our own stories. But the fact is that the revival of millets in India is simply remarkable. A grain which was totally forgotten has made a fantastic comeback, and in a big way, reminding us of our health and heritage. And to me, the revival of millets represents much more than the opening up of the Indian palate. It is the opening up of the consumer mindset, being open to new grains in our diet, appreciating diversity of crops, and rediscovering recipes and dishes that we have only heard of. Anyway, to talk about all these aspects and much more, we have with us Dwiji Guru, a good friend and a researcher, consultant, advocate for sustainable food systems. He works with social ventures to improve millet processing and a host of other things millet that we will talk about. He has done his PhD in mechanical engineering from the US and is leveraging all his learnings from there, and I'm sure from other experiences in his work in what he's doing today. So he's also a co-founder of an agri-tech startup. So before we get into a conversation with Dwiji, just a few tips or points of housekeeping. Just wanted to let you know that all this session is being recorded. So all of you are on mute. But we want this session to be as interactive as possible. So please type in your question in the chat box, and Madhu, who is the host, will pick it up from there. This session will be for about an hour. We have some questions for Dwiji, which will cover the topic, and then we'll take about 30 to 45 minutes, and then he will address the specific questions from all of you. So please stay with us till the end, and we'll connect. We'll share the contact details of BioBasics and how you can connect with us. And we can even share the contact details of Dwiji in case you have any other questions. So please do leave your feedback before you leave this session. It will help all of us make this better in the future. So that's from me. So my first question to Dwiji, in fact, first of all, Dwiji, welcome to the Huddle, BioBasics Huddle. So Dwiji, my first question to you would be, tell us a little bit about the work you do, what you do there, and how you got involved with millets. Why did you choose millets to work on to start with? A little bit about the organization that you work with.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you and share the chat with a bunch of people. It feels like one of those, nights that we used to spend in your day in your place in Bombay before we caught a train the next day to some place in North India.
But we can't hear you clearly, so maybe speak up a little bit.
Okay, is this better? Is this better?
Not much.
Not by much.
Okay. Yeah, this is okay.
Okay. So I was saying, it feels like we are sharing a chat like what we used to 10 years ago when you were in Bombay, and we would stop over on our way to UP or Delhi while we were traveling by train. So, and just that we have a few friends along, and much more than could have fit in your living room, I suppose. So happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity, and great to be interacting with everyone who's part of the BioBasics Huddle. I started my journey on millets about 7 years ago, and the idea was that the driver was to look at how technology can be used to benefit more people than what typical tech jobs do. So I, Ramesh mentioned, I studied and worked in the US kind of research work on gas turbines and jet engines, and realized that there's much better things I can do than improve combustion efficiency by a fraction of a percentage. And I decided, and I also got politicized and decided that I should put my skills and talents to better use, and decided that agriculture is something that I want to work on, and especially around something that affects the poor way more than what affects the rich. So from that perspective, I moved back to India in 2008. Just a second, I think I'll just...
Dwiji, I'm sorry, but we can barely hear you now.
Yeah,
so if you have a mic or something like that, which you can, if you have, otherwise.
Better?
Yeah, just barely. So maybe you can speak a little louder. That's fine.
Okay, let me just change my audio settings as well. I had put it on. Is this better?
Absolutely, it's much better.
Okay, so somehow when it's on auto, it keeps going back. I don't know why, but I hope it stays.
Yeah, this is clear. Yes, please go on.
Yeah, so I was saying that 2008, I started working on technology in agriculture for the rural sector, for the rural populations. And I worked on bamboo for a while, and then cotton. And then मकान और कपड़ा हो गया था थोड़ा बहुत, तो मैंने सोचा चलो रोटी पे काम करते हैं. And of course, millets were not new to me back then either. But at the same time, I hadn't really looked at agri-processing. And I got into millets because I figured more than roti. Well, roti in Kannada would be roti, and roti is not just of...
Sorry, Dwiji, the volume has gone down again.
Yeah, it's happening.
Okay, just give me.
Madhu, can you just confirm if you can hear?
My microphone is misbehaving. Just give me 1 second. I'll just change the sound settings and take off the auto thing on the mic. Just give me 1 second. Input devices, input volume. Yeah. Yeah. Is this better?
Better,
Yeah,
yes.
this is better.
I don't know why this is doing that. It's not on auto, but still it's doing that. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry about that. I hope it stays true. And
Yeah, if you can just speak louder, that should be good.
yeah, is this audible enough?
It is,
Yeah.
yeah, it is audible. Better,
Okay.
slightly.
Hopefully no more interruptions from technology. Just technology has to remind us, right, that we are not sitting in one room and talking. So I suppose, yeah. So so I had worked a little bit on bamboo and a little bit on cotton, and then I decided let's work on food crops. And you know, obviously it would be rain fed, because already my objective was to work on something sustainable and something that would affect a lot more people than you know, jet engines and gas turbines. So I had figured out that food is what agriculture is, what it would be, and naturally food crops. So when it comes to food, dryland is about 90% of cultivation of people engaged in cultivation across the world are working on dry lands. They are rain dependent. And it would be, people feel that advanced countries have a lot of irrigation and other things. No, even now, whatever cultivation happens in those countries are pretty much rain fed. So when we say rain fed farming or dryland cultivation, we invariably, like Ramesh was mentioning, that Kerala isn't dry enough. But you'd be surprised that, well, there are wetlands, I don't deny that. But at the same time, there's quite a bit of dry land even in Kerala. It's just that the populations are not as high, which are dependent on those dry lands, as are dependent on the wetlands. So in that sense, it's not very visible. Uh, so why would I work on millets? It was never really that I wanted to work on millets per se. It was more that I wanted to work on technologies that would make a difference. And I figured out that a lot of technological work has happened on paddy and paddy processing, but not as much on millets and millet processing. And that's how I got into millets. So yeah, I think I've spoken.
So talk a little bit about how millets are different from, maybe, I mean, I think all of us know we have all experienced millets in our own ways, but talk a little bit about how millets, or how do you see millets different from other grains, typical rice and wheat, particularly from an agriculture point of view, from a taste or food and point of view, and then of course the health point of view.
Yeah, sure. So millets belong to this same class of same family of plants called Poaceae, which are basically grasses. So whether it is paddy, wheat, barley, oats, any of the millets, they all belong to the Poaceae family. They're all grasses. So you know, sab ghas khane wale log hain hum, as in we are all people who eat grass. So not literally grass, but you know, there's grains, there's seeds.
Yeah.
Now, millets are not really one particular, you know, botanical taxonomical branch of grasses. There are different plants or different grains that are classified as millets. The strict definition would depend on what source you look at. Today, somehow it's come about to mean small millets, as in the millets with husk are the millets, and jowar, bajra, kamba, cholam, and our ragi. These are all not considered millets when a lot of people are saying that, hey, I've started eating millets. So what they really mean is that they have started eating the husk millets, because almost quite a few populations, communities are still.
We are losing you again, Dwiji.
Okay. Okay, I will just keep telling me whenever, and I'll keep increasing my mic volume, and hopefully it will stay there. Yeah, maybe if I keep that volume screen on my screen. I'm not sharing my screen, so I should be okay. So actually, I do want to share my screen. That reminds me. Can you give me the permissions, please?
Yeah, it's done. You should be able to do that.
Okay. Share screen. Where is my screen? Yeah, this one. So millets, when we look at it, are very much a part of, ouch, just give me 1 second. I just missed that file. Oh. Okay. Yeah. Is not supported. Damn. Okay. I don't know why that happened. Oh, I opened the wrong thing. Okay, now that's better. Just excuse me. I just thought I'll share a photograph of a field because we were talking about millets and how they look. So what you see on my screen here, let me see. Yeah, that's a little better. So what you see is actually a little millet field. And for a lay person, it will look like it's just grass that's overgrown the whole field. But it's actually little millet, and I took it from a little distance on a bund, standing on a bund, so that you could see the, the broader perspective of how the field looks. So in some sense, they look very much like grasses even today, unlike paddy or wheat crop. When you see a field of wheat, it doesn't look like this at all, because there's a lot of work that has happened on crops like wheat and paddy, and not as much on millets. And when I say not as much, I don't mean in terms of number of people who have adopted it and adapted it to their local environments. I just mean in terms of motivated breeding of these grains for specific purposes. And so millets in that sense are quote unquote more primitive, less domesticated than paddy and wheat. But all these are within quotes, because today there was actually a very nice talk on uncultivated foods organized by Asha. And there's probably maybe Biobasics guys. Are you guys linking to that? Anyway, you guys can share that.
Devi is linked to Asha. Yes.
Yeah. So, so one of the things that millets share with a lot of the uncultivated foods is that it's been adapted and worked on by various communities across the world. There isn't a place where millets didn't grow. Even in Kerala, I have seen records of millets being cultivated in the higher, higher slopes or the higher elevations, where you don't have as much water as you have in the lower lands. Or you take any place, I mean, anywhere in India, not just in India, the armies of Genghis Khan, the Mongol, they, 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 they had scouts going ahead and sprinkling proso millet grains, and the army would know that they should raid this village, or there's a village nearby that you can raid, when they saw these crops of proso millet standing. And the scouts didn't have as much communication. This communicated whatever they needed to. So armies used to march on millets and conquered half of Europe and a good part of Asia. So millets are not new. It was grown in China, Philippines, Japan, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Laos, all those, Thailand, all these countries. Everywhere we see history of millets being grown and cultivated. And a lot of these countries today, these cultures are considered to be primarily paddy rice eating communities. So I do distinguish between paddy rice and millet rice. So when I say rice, for me, it's any husked grains, the inner kernel, and not just paddy rice. So yeah, so millets are unique in each millet is unique in its own way. Then it's a classification for convenience. It's not a strict definition. They're not taxonomically unique. They are quite, related to each other. So yeah.
So, okay. So before I get to the next point, your volume is again down. So you might want to pick it up. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry about this. The
Yeah.
other
So
day
maybe you
when
want
I
to keep
tested
it
it,
on your screen and keep it high.
yeah,
So
I should probably
next,
do that.
what I wanted to get into was, I think from a consumer perspective, I think what will be interesting to know, we've heard of some of these millets. We at Biobasics have, we carry some of those millets, 7 varieties, and then we have the brown top also, which came up recently about a year or two ago. So we've experimented with these millets. So tell us a little bit about the various varieties of millets. Now you do have the coarser grains like bajra and the pearl millet and the sorghum, which are possibly the bigger grains.
Correct.
And then you have all these lists, there are about 5 other smaller grains ranging from ragi to proso to kodo to, barnyard, and I don't know which
Yeah.
one I'm missing, little millet. So
Yeah.
these are the other millets that and then of course the brown top, I don't know where you would classify, but
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about the various types. And are these the only millets that we are using right now? I mean, are there more that we don't know of? And what are their characteristics based on based on texture, taste? Just talk a little bit about that, because for people who are not exposed to millets,
Correct.
all these are, it's a black box. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, millets is millets, so explain a little bit about, there are nuances to each of these grains. So talk a
Yeah.
little bit about these grains.
Yeah. So, a couple of things that I would like to underline. The objective of including millets in our diets is not just nutrition related. I mean, while its nutrition drives the mood to include millets in our diets, I don't think we should limit ourselves to just the nutrition perspective. Just a quick thing before I get to the characteristics. What you see here, on my screen, is actually a bird's nest on a foxtail millet plant. And foxtail millet is navane in Canada.
Foxtail millet, yes.
Thinai,
Vinay.
in Tamil.
In Tamil, yes.
Yeah, in Tamil it is Thinai, Korra in Telugu. Hindi में इसको काकुन बोलेंगे. So millets are not just about good nutritious food for us. It's also about how the ecosystem is entwined with these plants in these grains. And this is this photograph is a beautiful portrayal of that. So why do we want to include millets in our food, and what are their different characteristics? So in terms of why we want to include millets, the nutrition that we derive, and I'm sorry I don't have the nutrition table with me right now. Maybe as I'm talking I can just pull up the table from my own website. Let me just do that. So it's not just about one grain giving us a lot of things. It's about various grains having different nutritive benefits. It's not just that we can, where is my screen share? Yeah, okay, here, stop share and then share this one. So it's that all these various grains have different characteristics, and each one has its own benefits. So what you see here is a nutrition table along the rows.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Dwiji?
Yeah, I will try to do that. Is that better? Yeah.
Some more, please.
It's going to blur out
in the
because
top.
the resolution
Yeah.
is not all that great. But I'll share the link to this. Madhu, it's on the millet.org. So if you can just share the link, that would be great.
Yeah.
So it's on the homepage itself on the millet.org. So what you see here is that different grains along the different rows: foxtail, little, kodo, proso, barnyard, brown top, sorghum, pearl, etc. And comparing it with paddy rice, wheat, and quinoa. Now, along the columns, what you see are the different nutritional components that are typically tracked: proteins, carbs, fat, minerals, fiber, blah, blah, blah. So what I'm more curious to share here, or what I would like to share here, is that the greens are the highlights, and these are not just for one grain. You will see that it's all across the board. There are various, plus points that you see. The one thing that we do not see any green on, which is basically that compared to the others, it's not all that high, is for Kodo millet. But if you see any of the traditional communities that eat millets, Kodo millet is considered one of the most nutritious, one of the most sacred, one of the most nutritious. So in that sense, when we talk about nutrition and grains, we have to remember that it's not just one grain that we need to, it's not like we have a silver bullet. So including millets means including very different grains. And as you can see from the, for example, look at the calcium content. Finger millet is so high in calcium when compared to all other grains.
Right.
Or phosphorus in some of these grains is so high. So when we talk about minerals or proteins being high or carbs being high or low or fibers being something, what we have to realize is that each of them is different. So it's like, fingers on your hands. Each one is different. Which one is better than the other? Well, it depends on what you want to use it for. So it's not like we can do without one, and we surely cannot do without some of these grains. As in, using them or including them in our diets is always beneficial.
So before you move on there, I noticed that the energy level, that's a blue line there.
Yeah.
That pretty much shows that all these grains are having the same, is
Correct.
that energy? Is that?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So how is that? I mean, for the same 100 grams.
Yeah, so this is why I keep saying.
Except for Kodo seems to have a much higher level of energy.
Yeah. Yeah. So energy is in kilocalories.
Kilocalories.
And this is purely a function of the carbohydrate content. It does not take into account various other factors which are important when we look at nutritional values or taste of foods. And this best way to encapsulate it is actually the carbohydrate to fiber ratio. So if you take the carbohydrate to fiber ratio, and that's your, the second column, and your fifth column here, right? So carbohydrate to fiber ratio is what we should be looking at rather than, purely carbohydrates or purely fibers, because this gives us a very good picture of how long it takes for our body to get that energy that we are talking about. This 350 kilocalories, if you have 6.7 grams of fiber, will take a good amount of time. Whereas if you take paddy and you look at 78.2, it takes about 1/7 the time, even if you take it as a linear function, and it is not a linear function. As your fiber content increases, the time it takes to digest the food, not that you need to do, it's harder to digest, not at all. It's just that there's more fiber. So what we call, people typically use, medical terms to decide on that, some very technical terms.
Volume, Dwiji, please.
Volume again, beg your pardon.
Madhu, you're also having the problem, or is it just me?
Yeah, no, it will be everyone. It's my microphone only. And I'm sorry, I don't have an earphone or a headphone with a mic in it. Somehow in the test run, it worked okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me for that. So, so what I was saying is that when we look at millets, it's not just one particular grain, and it's also not that it is only this particular grain has, including this one grain will give us everything. You also asked me about where is this guy? Yeah, this one. So this is actually anybody who's lived in Africa or has had Ethiopian cuisine, you would have had injera. Injera is made of teff.
What is it called again, Dwiji? Can't hear you.
Injera.
Okay.
It's made of teff. Teff is a grain, and this is what we see here. This is teff grains, and it's
brown or the white ones.
The white one is the skin-like thing. It's a glue. And the brown, bird droppings are.
Okay.
So what looks like teardrops or bird droppings, those are the grains. It's extremely small. What you see here is a millimeter scale. And you will see that the length of each grain is at the most 1.5 mm, not more than that. So it's fairly small, and the width is less than a millimeter. It's kind of cylindrical, but I'll just share. So this is dryland paddy, and just to give you an idea of the scale, how different, how small or how big the grains are. So yeah, so just to give you an idea, and this is Kodo millet. What you see here as the white thing in the middle is something whose bran has been rubbed off. And what you see close to the scale over here, I don't think you can see my pointer, can you?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay, good. So what you see close to the scale is grain with the husk removed. And the others are all the grains with their husk intact. So for a lot of us in South India, the Kodo millet looks like a mini or a micro-sized coconut with a cap on top. Unless you turn it over and then you see that, oh boss, this has been chopped off, right? So it's like a chopped off half coconut kind of thing. So each grain has its own characteristic. It's, I would say, just try it. Food is not a once in a lifetime decision. So please try different foods when you can, when your system allows you to, and be moderate, take gradual steps so that you study your body, you see how it takes, and then you can inculcate it in your diet, or it gives you an upset stomach or sleepless night, then, maybe have it fermented or, try it in a different form. So yeah, millets have different tastes. It's hard to say what, let me just go back to my photos. I had some nice pics. So this is, what do you call this in Tamil? In Kannada, we call it shavge, vermicelli kind of thing. What is it in Tamil?
Semia.
Semia.
No, if it's vermicelli, then it's semia. If not, it's sevai.
Yeah, but that's like Hindiized. Idiyappama, what is idiappa?
Idiyappam and sevai are kind of interchangeable.
Goya. You are an Afghan Tamilian. So anyway, I kind of remembered that it might be idiyappam. But yeah, so this is made of jowar, and this is Kodo millet rice, and this is little millet rava made into upma. So you can make different things. It depends on your dietary preferences. It depends on your taste, and sky's the limit. Just like you can do a ton of things with paddy rice, you can do a ton of things with millets. And
I'll mention here, Dwiji, that one of the things we have realized at Biobasics is some of these millets that we get in the market, in the regular market. Maybe we can touch upon this in the processing part of it, but we do realize that some of them get polished, heavily polished. And so each grain, kind of looks almost like the other grain. So you can't distinguish that. But anyway, we'll come to that, the processing part of it. But just to step back a little bit, let me ask you this. So these were the traditional grains of our maybe the South India or even possibly the North as well, all over the subcontinent. So talk a little bit about how did we lose touch with this? And how did we get so hooked on to what we call the rich man's grain of wheat and rice? How did we get into this?
Yeah. So just a quick thing, I'll keep harping on this. It's not just a subcontinent thing. It's all over the world. Millets were eaten all over the world. It's not just in the subcontinent or South India or, the drylands. So why did we, quote unquote, lose millets? Luckily for us, we didn't lose it. There are still some communities that are cultivating their traditional seeds and not, changed over to paddy and wheat and other crops. But it's a very small proportion of the population. And the reason for that is food is an extremely cultural and political thing. Um, we are a very stratified society. By we, I mean human society, not just Indian society. Human society is very stratified. Uh, those who wield power control not just the means of their own lives, but that of many other communities. And I don't just mean in India. In India, we have, I don't think I need to stress too much about it, but everywhere in the world, society is fairly stratified, especially so in India. And like you rightly pointed out, rice and wheat have been from times immemorial the food of the polished, the food of the refined, the food of the rich. And it's not that they didn't eat millets. It's just that when you wanted to celebrate, when you wanted to, show off your hospitality, you would host a meal of paddy rice and not of millets. And this is especially true when you have resources. Now, if you did not have resources, you essentially ate millets throughout the day or year around. So millets have been the food of the poor. And it doesn't mean that people didn't breed millets and develop these crops. They were, but they were not developed for taste. They were developed for resilience. I live in Bangalore, and not too far from us in Chikballapur district, they used to get rains, good rains, once in 3 years. How did the communities adopt or adapt to the situation? They grew millets which would store for 3 years. No questions asked, no pests, nothing. Because they get rains only once in 3 years. They did not go about changing their terrain and irrigating their lands and cultivating paddy. They just went about life by choosing to change their food, or not even change, but hold on to those parts of their diets which can sustain them in these climates. And this is not just true about the Dalits of Chintamani. It's true about the Adivasis of any place even today. Dalits and Adivasis grew and have been growing millets even to this day. If we read their stories, if we saw their lives, and if we were sensitive enough to recognize that they too want to be showing their hospitality by serving. I mean, you can see this in, Himachal Pradesh. They eat so much finger millet in the rural communities, even today. But somebody from the city visits, they will make gehu ki roti. They won't give you jaw ka sattu in Bihar. They will give you chane ka sattu. So in various communities, we see this, that millets are still continuing at a very small scale in their localized environments for their own consumptions. And in many cases, they have lost it too, because everyone wants to live a better life. And a better life today means paddy rice and wheat, because it's always been the food of the rich. And how do you show that you have made it in this world? You show it by having the food that the rich people eat. A lot of the craze, you would be surprised at what are the kind of places that Chinese food used to sell in the 90s and early aughts. And now if you see, there is Domino's in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Why? Because rich people eat pizza. So we also want to eat pizza. So can't really find fault in people wanting to eat paddy rice when those were the foods that were eaten by the rich and the powerful back in the, for about at least a millennium, if not longer. So that's the class angle to our foods, and why millets are not as prevalent as they were, even 100 years ago. Or why am I going 100, even 30 years ago in the 1990s? So yeah, it's still there. Luckily for us, it's still there.
Yeah, so I think that that aspirational grain, if you like, of rice or wheat,
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
I think that is what people crave for at this point. And I think just like you mentioned, some of these processed foods that people crave for, and leaving aside our traditional foods, going in for more the fast food, the processed food kind of food, which is again very aspirational.
Yeah.
I think the resurgence or the revival of some of the traditional foods we are seeing, at least in our groups, if not overall, maybe we are the alternative kind of crowd, but there as well as the grains. So this, I think, a revival, which is, I think, something that we should be proud of and we should actually welcome as
Yeah.
we go forward. So tell me a little bit, I mean, like we said, are these movements, I mean, the movement in India, when did it start? I mean, how did this revival start? How come we are seeing all these millet grains now? Like you said, 30
Yeah.
years ago, we didn't probably have it. Like I
Yeah.
was growing up in school or college, I have not seen this kind of revival. So
Correct.
why now? And who has started it? And, you know, what is the story there?
The story is that our lifestyles have changed so much and our food systems have got messed up so much that we have a huge lifestyle disease load in the middle class. And there's also an active interest among various people to seek out better food. And luckily for us, we have a lot of people applying their mind, not listening to their parents. I have to say this first. You study, don't worry about food. You'll get something or the other. I'll give you food. Don't worry about food. You don't need to learn cooking. You'll get something. You can learn cooking later also. True, you can learn cooking at any time, but at the same time, we have to be connected to our foods, and that connections are rebuilding. And in some sense, that has led to a resurgence in millets. But it's primarily the fear of disease. And there are quite a few people, unfortunately, who peddle in fear. And I don't just mean in food, but in various other forms, as you can see happening all around us today. So in that sense, I feel the fear of diseases and death has fueled this resurgence in millets. And it is no coincidence that it kind of runs parallel to the other fears that are being stoked in society today. But coming back to millets and how did it start? I really don't see an incident or an event that triggered it. It's been gradual and it's been building up, and now it's reached a stage where it's huge, but without there's not enough wind in the sails. So, but still, it seems to be moving. So we are not sure which way the current is going to go. So we are like those seafarers who just can't seem to figure out where will the ship head next. And that brings me to the point that you mentioned earlier about the kind of millets that are available in the market. Neither the producers nor
The volume, Dwiji, again, sorry.
Okay, yeah. So neither the producers nor the traders nor the consumers, or by traders I mean distributors, retailers, processors, all these intermediaries. There's a big gap in knowledge about millets, which is causing anything and everything. As in, I just let me just go back to this photograph. Where is that? Yeah. So what you see here is the white grain. That's the bran has been removed, and the bran is where the most of the fiber content is. Now, if you take off the bran, and as you rightly pointed out, Ramesh, they have about the same energy, so it gets released in super quick, just like it does with bleached paddy rice. I like to call them bleached and not polished. There's nothing polished about rice whose bran has been taken out. It's bleached. It's been made white. The preference for white is not just in humans, not just in Indians, not just, okay, let me start from more basic, not just among Brahmins and upper caste people, it's among every section of society. It's not just in human society. There have been experiments done, and even animals prefer white when compared to colorful things. They feel safer around white. They consume white things more readily than they would consume something that is colorful, and there are reasons for that too. So this aspect of preference for white has allowed a lot of unscrupulous elements to push in the name of making it easier to adapt, or adopt rather. Here in this case, people can work this into their diets much more easily. I mean, it's probably true, but at the same time, easy is not necessarily the right way, because they are not going to get the nutrition that they are seeking by going for those white grains. They need to go for something that is colorful, especially when it comes to Kodo millet. It's almost like it's chocolate colored. And I'll just show that photograph. Where is that photograph of the rice? Yeah, this is Kodo millet rice. After it's cooked, it's almost like chocolate colored, and there's a lot of light, so you probably see it as beige, but yeah, beige is what it is, dark beige, maybe even greenish depending on how much bran is there and how you cooked it. So overall, what I'm trying to say here is that there isn't really a trigger point, and right now the market is growing in a alarming speed, at an alarming pace. Alarming, it's not an accidental use of the word, because like I mentioned earlier, we really don't know which way it's going to go, because a lot of people don't recognize what is quality and what is not, and it is allowing the market forces to push whatever is in stock as good. And yeah, that's where we are at when it comes to resurgence or revival of millets. Why did it happen? Like I said, yeah, I think I've answered those questions. Yeah.
Okay. So from a consumer point again, could you talk a little bit about how does a consumer who is new to millets, what should they be starting with in terms of what dishes should they be looking at?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us have not got into millets in a big way. So
True.
how do we what is the best way to ease into this? It's a change. It's a major change. And when it comes to your comfort food, people are comfortable with rice and wheat.
Correct.
You build in millets as part of your diet, if not, at least to build it as part of your diet. So tell us a little bit about how one can build millets into one's diet.
Yeah.
Slowly,
So
steadily.
true, and that's a very good use of the words "build it into your diets," because we really don't want sudden changes. Um, it's not good for your health. You might have a constitution that might be able to make that switch, but gradual changes are much more sustainable rather than sudden changes. So it's always a good idea to work it in gradually. And that path is never complete, as in we will never have enough diversity. It depends on how the climate is changing. If it's the same climate year on year, then hey, you can keep eating the same thing year after year or throughout the year. But fortunately, I think our climate is not constant throughout the year. Unfortunately, our climate is changing even year on year, where we don't have the predictability that we had, 20 or 30 years ago. So we need to keep adapting our food as well to keep in step with what changes are happening around us. And the best way to work millets into your diets is actually by starting with diversification. Don't just buy the same variety of paddy rice that you do. Get some other variety of paddy rice. Get some varieties which have some bran on it, which is not bleached white, but slightly brownish, slightly yellowish, slightly reddish. Increase that. Go for something that's more deeply red, more brown, more dark. And then start also working in different grains. Grains that your grandmother used to feed you probably. Or you had in some friend's house when you visited them somewhere, right? So start working these things gradually. And I would strongly recommend working the staple forms, unless you have kids who are not ready to change and you need to kind of get them into it by deception rather than by doing it upfront. Otherwise, I would say stick to the staple forms, because that's the staple forms are when you get the maximum nutrition. And try to cook in traditional ways, as in traditional dishes, and experiment too. Food is not a one-time decision. I keep saying this again and again because it's very important to remember. Try different things. One thing I do want everyone to remember is that whenever you're trying new things, please observe your body. Are you feeling more thirsty? Are you losing weight? Are you able to sleep better? Are you losing sleep because of some foods? So broadly speaking, whenever you work in new things into your diet, please do it during the earlier parts of the day. Dinner is not the time for experimentation. Try it for your breakfast or lunch. Make preparations as I showed you. You can make upma, you can make rice, you can make idiyappam, various things. And each grain has its own thing. I mean, it would take me a lot of time to elaborate on that. Just go online and search and you'll find various recipes. Not everything will work. It's better to go for curated recipes rather than random ones online. So go for individuals who are posting recipes with some photographs which talk about how things can fail in that recipe. This is pressure cooked rice. It's not open pot cooking. And I have used about 3.5 times volume measure of water. 3.5, probably even 4, somewhere around 3.5 to 4 is what I use. And it's as, Kannadadalli ನಾವು ಉದುರು ಅಂತೀವಿ, ಬಿಡಿಸ್ಬಿಡಿಸ್గా ఉంది ಅಂತ Telugulo. I don't know what it's called.
Volume music.
Yeah. In Hindi में बोलते हैं ना कि it's फुला फुला सा है चावल. It's not like solid mass, but loose, fluffy in English. So yeah, so you can cook rice in various ways with various grains. You can make dishes like palau or bisibelebath or various various dishes, khichdi, pongal. Proso millet pongal is amazing. Whoever hasn't had it, please try it out sometime. Proso millet is panivaraga in Tamil. Bariga in Telugu, and Hindi में उसको चेना बोलते हैं. So yeah, I mean, there are various grains. You can cook it in various ways and you can work it in gradually, and don't make it a life or death thing. It is not. It's about diversifying your food so that you're more responsible and you're more adapted to your climate and your times.
Okay, so I think we've got quite a few questions now. I think so. I would request Madhu to kind of take it in the interest of time, and I think we can start taking the questions. Madhu, if you can just start looking at the questions and passing it on.
So the first question is are millets good for urban consumers, and why?
Millets are good for anyone and everyone, primarily because we need to diversify our foods. We are eating way too much of the same cereal grains as in the form of paddy rice and wheat, and it would be good to diversify our cereal consumption. I mean, just look at the number of vegetables you cook in your house, or the different meats that you eat, or the different fruits that you eat, and how many cereal grains do you eat. So millets are good from that perspective alone, not just in terms of, I'm not even considering the nutrition and other things. So yes, it's good for urban consumers too, not just for what is considered as people doing manual labor. It's good for anybody and everybody. and it needs to be prepared and tasted, and it's a developed taste. If you haven't tasted something good for all your life, it'll take you some time to adapt to a new food. So yeah, and invariably people do find excuses to not eat it too. But at the same time, having said that, not everything is for everyone. Your system may not agree, or some grain may not agree with your system. And that's why I keep telling that you need to observe your body and make these gradual changes so that you can identify. Millets are not one monolithic grain that like paddy rice is. Even paddy rice isn't in that sense.
Right.
There are varieties of paddy rice. You may not be able to digest one, but you would be able to digest the other. So where it's just varieties. With millets, it's actually different species. So they have very different characteristics. So please try different grains. And I mentioned this earlier also, that it's not just as, when I say staple forms, it's not just as rice. Make it into your idli dosa. When you ferment a grain, it has a very different characteristic. Your body sees it very differently. Your gut biome will be able to digest a fermented grain way better than the raw grain. Or the parboiled grain is again very differently perceived by our body when compared to a raw grain. So, there are various things that you could play around with depending on your internal constitution. So there's no blanket yes or no. The yes is primarily because we need to diversify our cereal consumptions.
Do you want to continue sharing your screen? Just
Yeah.
just with that, so you can probably we can see you just
Okay.
better. The next question is misconceptions about millets and thyroid. What are your thoughts?
So this is the TLDR answer is that too long didn't read answer is that we don't have good reliable information on what grains cause thyroid issues. Most research quote millets, and when they say millets, they mean bajra, pearl millet. Very few studies have been done for the other millets. It's primarily for bajra that we have literature, and even there, the literature is sketchy. And again, thyroid issues are caused by almost every food class that we can find in our diets. There are ways to balance it. And what is important is that we understand our foods and try out different things so that we can, and people with thyroid issues can actually sense their energy levels are different at different times with different foods. So please observe your body. And there is a long article that we have written. I'll share the link. Please do share it with all the attendees, Madhu, where we have discussed what is there in literature and what is the source of this information about misconception about thyroid issues with regard to millets.
Yeah, we'll add it to the description of the video when we upload it also, and we'll share it with the people.
Sure.
Yeah. The next question is, some people advocate shifting to millets completely. Is that advisable?
No. If it's one millet, 100% no. If it's just millets, also no. Just like eating only paddy rice is bad, eating only Kodo millet or only proso millet or only foxtail millet is bad too. What we need is a balance of various things. And where does that balance, where is it balanced for you is dependent on your health, on your taste, on your socioeconomic capacities, and to a large extent, your political strength as well, socio-political strength as well. So I would not prescribe a complete shift to millets unless you are following a regimen for a particular treatment. Millets do have medicinal values just the same way that some varieties of paddy rice have a lot of medicinal value. So it is necessary to follow a regimen when you're trying to treat a particular illness or you're trying to come across as woke. But otherwise, I do not see any reason to not eat anything. If the situation demands, eat it.
And the next question, I swear I'm not making this up, but someone's asking, where do we get organic millets in northern India?
There are quite a few people who are now moving to millets, and therefore it's starting to be available in stores here and there, but very few. Right now, the best bet is actually online. Buying it online is the best bet. And I would stress on this particular point. I haven't really touched on it so far. Lot of people feel that millets by default are organic, which was true till recently, as in the last 2-3 years, because of the market value. Just as with any other, sector of society today, whenever there is a financial return involved and financial motivation, we see corruption in the ways we do things. And that's true as much about farmers as it is with every other profession. So millets are not necessarily organic unless they can either certify it or they vouch for it on their integrity and you believe them. So do look around for sustainable cultivated millets, and organic is good, but organic is not sufficient. Try to source it from traditional communities which are still cultivating it as a part of their multi-cropping farms. It's not easy. It's a process. Don't worry, take gradual steps. If you can't get organic certified millets, if it's too expensive online, go for something that's not very expensive, but go for something that still has some bran on it. And the way you make out whether it still has some bran or not, the best way is actually to cook it and see. I'll share some links on that aspect as to how you can identify whether the bran is still there or not. You can see it on those websites, web pages on to how to identify if bran is still there on the rice that I'm eating.
I just want to add, some of these, most of the millets that we know of are carried by Biobasics.
Of course.
And, we not only carry it in the unpolished form, so we are very particular about that. And also we carried both on the raw form as well as the parboiled variety. So check us out. There you will find a lot of variety in Biobasics, and we do deliver these things across India. So feel free to check there as well. Go on, Madhu.
Yeah, which is why I said I didn't make it up. The next question is, so why is the price of millet becoming higher, and why is it becoming such a niche product? Why is it becoming a superfood? Yeah. Where more people can't afford it?
So there is a price differential if you look at it in terms of price per kg. But stay with me for a minute. I know we have run out of time, but just stay with me for a minute here. What is really important is how many meals can this 1 kg last me? When you look at price, you have to look at price per serving. And rice, whether it's paddy rice or millet rice with bran still on it, can take 1:3.5 to 4 times water when compared to the bleached. People call it polished. There's nothing polished about it. It's bleached. Sorry, Ramesh. It's bleached. So bleached rice takes at the most 1:2. And some varieties can take 1:2.5, but that's kind of where it stops, at least for my taste. I can go up to 1:4 with many varieties of millets. And the reason for that is the bran content. And so, which is true about the paddy rices too. When it still has the bran on it, you can go 1:3.5 to 4. What that does is the amount of rice that you cook is smaller. So you're paying almost twice the price as what you would for bleached rice, but it would last you longer. Not just that, when the rice still has bran on it and you cook it, it still has the fiber. There's something called as the satiety index, which is basically that how full do you feel after eating a certain quantity of food. And anybody who has eaten rice with bran still on it and bleached rice, I mean paddy rice, you would recognize that you cannot eat the same quantity of the natural rice with bran. The bleached one you can eat a lot more. And that's why you see these, what do you say? Movies and photographs of mounds of rice, right, on your plate. You can't do that when it comes to the natural forms of rice. You can only do it with bleached rice because the fibers have all been taken out. You don't feel full even after eating that humongous quantity of rice. So, yeah, the cost per serving of millet rice, and I have again a link for this which I shall share. I think the description this time is going to be full of links, Madhu, pardon me.
Which is a good thing.
So check out that link and you will be able to read more about the cost per serving, which is what we should be looking at. Unfortunately, I have been talking about this for almost 2 years now. I've still not been able to convince even one fellow to label their rice, rice as in whether it is any of their natural rice in terms of cost per serving, because that really is the picture that we should be giving our consumers. The cost per kg is a legal requirement. Keep it on your labels, but please, biobasics guys, you guys need to do that too. Put your cost per serving, whether it is parboiled rice, whether it is, traditional varieties of rice or any of your millet rices.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yes. I think that whole awareness has to be there, and that's true not only in terms of rice, but a lot of these organic and natural products, including cold pressed oils. The use of oils is again much lower when you stick to cold pressed oils as opposed to refined oils. So it's a good idea.
Yeah, and just a quick thing there, that when we say cost per serving, I'm just talking about the cost in terms of literal weight and rupees. I'm not talking of health benefits. I'm not talking of, efficiency benefits, lifestyle benefits, none of those things, weight loss and all those other aspects. I'm just talking in terms of rupees per weight, per serving.
Per serving, yeah.
Kannan wants to know what are different kinds of preparations that you can make, particularly with foxtail millet.
I make idlis with them. I eat most of my millets as rice. I cook it as rice. I have it with kolambu. I have it with sambar. I have it with, I make pudina rice out of it. I make pulao out of it. A whole bunch of things. But my personal favorite for foxtail millet is snake gourd. Snake gourd with pepper, preparation of snake gourd with pepper and warm foxtail millet rice. Amazing. Heaven. That's my favorite. But it's my favorite. I mean, my wife likes it with, with just buttermilk, nothing else. My girl, she will eat anything that we put in front of her, but then her favorites are different. She likes it as bisi bada baat. Primarily because you can't taste the rice most of the time because it has so much other masala in it. So, yeah.
So here's a big one. Your thoughts on Dr. Kadir Wali's talk about eating only 5 positive millets: barnyard, kodo, little, foxtail, and brown top millet. So that's like part 1 of the question.
Yeah, no, it's not a very big thing, as in it's not a big question in that sense. I've already answered that. See, Dr. Kadir is looking at millets, people including millets, to improve their health, and not just in a generic sense. He talks about how each millet can cure certain diseases. So if you believe in using online episodes or online videos to cure yourself of diseases, please go ahead. But I'll just underline that cautionary note that I put in earlier, that Please do gradual changes and observe your body. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I personally would not ever prescribe something like that. And the prescriptions also change with times, with various other situations. So we have to see everything in its own context. Millets are good to be included in anybody's diet. But at the same time, I would not vouch, or I would not advise anyone to make any sudden changes, gradual changes, and keep as much of a diversity as you can, because who knows what's going to be available tomorrow or not available tomorrow. We need to have a gut biome which is very flexible, which is adapted to our local environment. And as that is what sustainability is all about, that is what being conscious is all about. Of your own self, your body, and of your surroundings, of your ecology, and your responsibility to the future generations. We cannot keep growing paddy rice forever the way we are cultivating today, whether it is in terms of the water, in terms of the pesticides, in terms of everything else. So, yeah.
So the next question is quinoa a millet?
No, quinoa is not a millet in that it's a pseudo cereal. But like I said, what is a millet it depends on who you ask. A lot of people consider quinoa as millet because it's not rice, period. So does it really make sense to go and argue, hey, this is not a millet, this is a millet, this is not a millet, this is it really doesn't matter what you call millets. What is important is that you understand your foods, you accept things that will help you adapt to your local environment. And quinoa is not adapted yet into these climates. They are being grown nowadays, but it evolved, not just developed, but it evolved in a very specific climatic zone, which is the Andean highlands, Peru, Bolivia, forgetting Venezuela, or one of those other countries, South American Andean highlands. Bolivia is, I think, where it comes from. Anyway, so, but it adapts. It's a very hardy crop. It grows here in India as well. There are quite a few farmers who are cultivating it, but then cultivating it for market is problematic. And I don't want to get into that here because of shortage of time. But broadly speaking, there's nothing wrong with millets being, or quinoa not being a millet or being a millet. Try quinoa too. It's an indulgence. Food is an indulgence. It should be aspirational. So I have a deal with my daughter that she will get to eat quinoa once in 2 or 3 months. I would rather that she aspire for that than for some chocolate or yeah.
You did touch on this, but the question is: are millets generally organic? Do they have to be certified? And why is it important that they have to be unprocessed?
No, it's not unprocessed. Please understand. I don't like it to be bleached. The brand should be retained. The reason to keep the brand is that most of your fiber, not most, all of your fiber that you find in these grains are in the bran layer, the digestible fiber, I mean, not the cellulosic fiber that's there in the husk, which we cannot digest. So we need to look at what we can digest. Bran we can digest. We need it for good bowel movement, for better absorption of the sugars, gradual absorption of the sugars, and general good health, because the fibers stay in your gut for a little longer and therefore nurture your biome, the gut biome, much more than paddy, especially bleached paddy rice. Now, whether it is organic by default, no, it's not. Like I was saying, most people are cultivating these for the market nowadays. And anything that comes to the market is very rarely being consumed at home. And unfortunately, they're not by default organic. So do look for certified. And at a certain level, don't get too stressed about organic at each and every level. It is important to go organic. There's no debating that. but it is a process. Because you need to familiarize yourself with how do you identify that something is organic or not. And labels, I mean, Volkswagen cheated the US EPA. what more, or BMW and Mercedes-Benz have been doing the same thing, and they were fined in Europe. So all these reliability brands, I mean, we know what Coca-Cola does to its consumers. So all these brands have their limitations. Please understand that. Don't let food become a commodity. Let food be a thing that you relate with other humans through. Let it be something that you relate with other humans, and not just as a commodity, not just as a brand. So going organic is about reconnecting with the producer, knowing where your food is coming from, knowing the well-being of that farming family, of the processor who's processing it, of the trader, of the shopkeeper who's selling it to you. So it's not just about saving the world. We do need to do something so that we have less blood on our hands. But that's not just by looking for an organic label. It's about knowing your food.
Just like last two more maybe.
Sure.
They want to know, as a vegan, can they rely on getting sufficient B12 and protein from millets?
Very good question. I don't have a complete answer. Like you probably have figured out, I don't give full answers. I refer you to some websites. But for this, I do not have a link. But I'll share a few things, which I have already shared. I probably will underline that. It's more appropriate to say I'll underline those things, emphasize. The composition, the nutritional availability of different nutrients, the bioavailability of different nutrients changes with fermentation. And this is something that I strongly recommend all vegans to do, is have a good proportion of fermented foods in your diet. Soy is a ferment, I mean, not soy, but what do you call that? Tofu. Tofu is a fermented thing. It's a cultured thing. Any of our idli, dosa kind of stuff. Amli. Amli is when you make kool in Tamil Nadu. Amli in Karnataka. Lapsi in Hindi. People feel that you just boil something with a lot of water and it becomes lapsi or amli or kool, but it's not. It's fermented. It's soured with some culture, and you consume it after some time. These do give you a lot more nutrition than raw foods. Raw foods are good, but this is also raw but processed by something else, and you're smart enough to recognize that this is helpful. By the way, you can make amazing vegan ice cream with Proso millet. Check it out sometime. Millets, by the way, millet milk is available nowadays. I don't know if you guys have come across.
I've not come across. Okay.
Oh yeah. Millet milk is quite cool nowadays. Doesn't work as well as soy milk latte and all that, but millet milk, and especially millet milk curd, again cultured, is quite the thing. So hey, knock yourself out.
I think this is the last question we can take. So what does your organization do exactly?
Good question. I didn't really answer that in the beginning. So what we do is we provide resources for different stakeholders in the millet supply chain. And as you probably figured out by now, I don't just work on millets. It's more about sustainability and sustainable food systems. So take a systems approach to food, and around millets, of course, but more from a perspective of food systems and not just about promoting millets come what may. So processing, identifying what machines to use, how do we retain the brand, how do we identify that the brand is retained, what can be grown in what place, when, what kind of practices should we adopt to make it more natural, more better, and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah. So we are a resource group. We don't really farm millets. We don't process millets ourselves. We do eat millets, but it's not like we sell millets. So we work with various stakeholders, producers, processors, intermediaries, consumers on different aspects of millets.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up the question hour. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Madhu. Thanks for taking those questions out from the. So anyway, thanks, Dwiji. It was wonderful having you as a speaker at the Biobasics Huddle. We really appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time, sharing the knowledge that you've accumulated over all these years. And we really appreciate it. And Dwiji's contact details, I suppose, will be out there. Please do check out the website and know more about Dwiji and the organization that he works with, and that will be it's on your screen right now. You can also reach out to Biobasics.
Yes.
And if you have any questions about millets or where you can get them or whatever, we carry all of it at Biobasics. So thank you all for joining us at this huddle. We hope this session was useful to all of you, and we sincerely hope that you would reflect on this session and choose organic food and millets and build it into your diet as Dwiji mentioned. Feel free to reach out to Biobasics. We'll be happy to answer your questions. The video recording of this will be available at our Biobasics YouTube channel, so feel free to log in there in a couple of days, and then we can subscribe to our channel as well. And so once again, thanks, Dwiji. Appreciate it. And thank you everybody for joining. Until we have the next Biobasics Huddle, goodbye and good night. Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you, Madhu, Ramesh, everyone at Biobasics. Bye.
Bye.